Alrighty, so week 4 is graded and pretty much done at noon today. It'll be, which is about an hour or so. It'll be done because attendance will be closed. You can still watch it, and I would recommend it because in it I was asking some pretty specific questions, and most of you, there's a couple of you that really replied the way I hoped. So make sure you do. And I'll just say again, the idea of the attendance, even though it's not due until today, actually should be teacher thing, sorry, needs to be done the sooner in the week the better, because it gives you that preview, that both review of what week 4 and preview of week 5. And today I'm actually going to preview week 6 because we are at the place in this class where we're moving into the week before the dev is due. And so here's what I want to say is that if you struggled to write the logic for the stimulus, right, and it was really understandable why it would be, now's a new opportunity for you to give some thought to what you're going to do as far as your Dev 0, which I will reiterate to you. You have 3 in this class, 3 opportunities to actually write code, bring that code to me, do a code review, right? And so because that's worth 50% of your grade, those 3 items, it turns out to be about 16% of your grade. I think I've talked about this before. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is it's time to start thinking about it, right? Because I had a goal for myself for this semester was I was going to do something new, because I've kind of used a concept for rock, scissors, paper over the last about year and a half. And I decided it's time for me to up my concept. So I did. And in doing that, I really had to think about, like, the thing that I'm trying to create is representing a real thing in the world. And oftentimes, and the reason I'm bringing this up now is as I was reading some of your dev when you were writing about in your week 4 Learn Together, some of your concepts, are really good. And just know that the process of actually going to write code may make you kind of flex that concept to either maybe make it a little more straightforward, because there are nuances in anything, especially, anything. I'm not even going to say in gameplay, but just anything, okay? So I'm going to show you my output because, I'll talk to you about what I kind of had to do, because I couldn't really represent my concept 100% because there are things that vary that I don't really have access to. And I wanted to create something that was a little more, you're going to laugh when I say it, a little more straightforward. But just a word about the Learn Together code. I very much appreciated the people who did the code early, and I hope you appreciated, because of those who missed actually implementing methods, right? And remember the difference between a function and a method, right? So a method is just a function. The difference is where it lives. It lives inside of an object. So writing functions without implementing methods, which are functions and objects, you lose some points for this last week, okay? So that was part of what I wanted you to learn, in addition to implementing objects in some way, right? Because there was other ways you could have implemented and returned, right? So anyway, but overall, it seems like for those who heard my feedback, you got it for some of the ones. And again, the benefit of posting early, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, is that you get that feedback. Now, you might wonder, when on Thursday do I have to do that? I yesterday got it before noon. So if you have it in there, maybe around 10 or 11 on Thursday, you'll get my feedback. So hopefully that's an encouragement to those who have done it, continue to do it, and those who haven't, to do it, so you get that feedback. Okay, so we are moving into our last section, which is all about arrays and looping. And understanding the idea of how to make your code loop through something, right? To do something for a certain amount of times is absolutely fundamental. It's done in every programming language. It's implemented in different ways. We are going to, and he shows writing a for, let I equal, I less than maybe an array length, and then add something to that. We add like 1 to that, we loop around, we do it again. So we control the looping by the length of the array, but it's not the only way to do it. There's other ways. And I personally like the for each loop that you're going to learn. So now let me just say, because we do this section over the next 2 weeks, we're only going to have next week's Learn Together to give you some experience of writing array and loops, creating arrays, writing loops to iterate over those arrays. So, and then because Dev 0 is here on the 18th of February, we won't have a Learn Together. So whenever we have the Dev, we don't have a Learn Together, because really that's the idea, is that you're writing some code on your own. Okay, so going back to my original statement, if you struggled a little bit writing that stimulus code, right now is a great time to be thinking about, and you've already had to do some writing for this class now about what your idea is. Now think about the logic that you're going to have to write to implement that. And the sooner you think about it and attempt to write some just code to get it done, even if it's just straightforward code and maybe it doesn't have all, but just that concept of writing that core function that does what you're trying to do. Like, what are the inputs you're going to need, right? What are the calculations you need to make? What is the information you're going to return? How are you going to use arrays and objects and all those things? So here's what I did. And I'll actually move over here. So this last summer, we bought our first electric car. And I love it when my thing does not work sometimes. So one of the things I've been wanting to know is, because the car is charged here at the house and at a supercharger, if I because it's run, we use it for our business. We have a food delivery business, and we use it for that. We also use it for our own personal needs. And so because of that, I charge at home and I charge at the supercharger. And the superchargers are Tesla's chargers that do a really fast charge of your battery, but it costs more. So I've been wondering, like, what is the cost of charging this car, right? Like, if you, in any kind of vehicle, you often want to know, how much am I spending on gas? Well, I want to know, how much am I spending on electricity? And it varies based on the location. It also varies based on how much is in the battery and how much I want to charge the battery to. Okay. So that's just the concept there. And so I had to figure out first how to calculate that. How do I figure out the cost of it, right? Because I know what my kilowatt per hour, and actually kilowatt includes hour, but I know what my cost of energy, electricity is here at my house. I know what my cost of electricity is when I'm at a supercharger. So how do I do this, right? How do I figure out, I know what the cost is, how do I figure out that particular charging session that I'm doing? So what I ended up doing, and I'll show you the code in a minute, and I'm not going to go over it in a lot of detail. Honestly, I just want you, because this week what I really am trying to do is inspire you to start thinking about writing that function, or 2 functions, or 3, that actually is kind of the core of what you need to do, what your Dev 0 is. And the reason I'm saying that is, as you learn this last section on looping and arrays, then you can implement that as you're learning it, versus trying to kind of eat the whole apple. Let's eat it a bite at a time. So let me move over to mine. here, and I haven't pushed this code yet, and I haven't completed documenting it yet either. But one of the things I decided to do on mine was I wrote a function that will randomly, and the reason I did this is I didn't want to have to enter a lot of data. So I just did some random, I'll show you this in a minute, run for random times. And actually it should be, because I'm specifying the number of times I want it to run. And it's actually should be run, and it's, so I'm going to rewrite that. That's really not what it's doing. So let me just show you that function. Where's it at? Oh, I did just create an object here to hold some data. I created an empty array here. I ended up rewriting based on location, because location is based on how many kilowatts and how much cost it is. But I rewrote this with a ternary operator. Again, this is part of what you'll learn later, but in this dev is to venture outside of what we've learned. You'll have to do that a little bit for this one. Cost per session. Here we go. So what I did here, again, I'm going to change the name because it's really not what it's doing. Is I'm passing in the number of times, and it's creating random data is what it's doing. It says 4, right? So I passed in this case, 25. I determine a first number and last number. And really what that first and last number is my starting battery percentage and my ending. Because these are pretty, like most of the time, if I'm charging it as supercharger, it's more based on how much time I have. So that's where the variability of what I was trying to do doesn't quite line up with kind of a straightforward coding concept. So what I did is and not only that, because I'm generating random numbers, I also had to make my first number, which is going to be my starting battery state, and my ending battery. So that's got to be less than my ending. So I did some logic there to do it. And then I also did loc, which is location. Oh yeah, why did I do that? It's funny, after you write code, you often have to figure out why oh yeah. So actually in this case, I'm randomly selecting whether it's home or supercharger in this case. I'm also, as I'm iterating through based on the number of times I wanted to have the computer generate some data, I just put in some dates. Like this is just a string. This is not actually the date. And then I said, if the location is 0, because loc is a random number generated, and I do a floor on it, which actually makes it an integer number. So if it's 0, it's home. And if it's else, it's a supercharger, because those are my only 2 locations. So by doing this is really the core. And this is the part that took me a little while to kind of set and think about, right? How I was going to determine the cost per session. And there were some input values I needed. I had to do some calculation. I had to determine the location here. Oh yeah, so in this case, right? So here's what I want to say. I'm going to kind of stop here. Here's what I want to say. One of the things you want to learn, because I could go over this, that's why I'm tending not to do this in a lot of detail. This is really what you want to be learning, which is go into your app.js, right? Hit a breakpoint and watch this thing run. Hit refresh and watch it run. That's really what you want to do, because it could take me a while to go through and explain this. And that's actually not the goal today. The goal today was just to say, it's not that my code is also an example of what you will do, right? Because we all have a varying level of experience. And so, but more than anything, the important thing is for you to start writing some code that represents the concept that you just wrote about. Because here's the deal, coming to talk to me, or again, if you have somebody in your life that is into this profession, has some skill, right, is really it's so beneficial. Because it's like you have somebody to bounce ideas across with, right? You have somebody to help you articulate what these things are, because part of what I'm going to grade you on is how well, first, did you get something working based on my requirements? And second, did you actually, can you actually talk about it? Is it working code? Does it do what you wanted? And can you talk about it? It's a big jump, right? Where do you get that experience of talking about it? Well, I may be one of your only options, so come see me. But anyway, it was kind of fun. It was really actually fun to do this because I was really trying to represent something in the world that I want to know. So what I also did at the very end is, after I generated some random data 25 times, I also did some, and my thing's in the way so you can't see it, but I did a total. So I could say, how much was the total cost for these 25 randomly selected beginning and ending and locations. Because that, even though maybe that doesn't represent real world, but it gives me now a framework that I can take into our next part of this class, where we learn, right, to actually interact with the browser. And because right now, only thing we're doing is kind of using the browser as a console. That's not our next step. I was going to say, that's not what you want to do. Ultimately, as somebody who writes code in JavaScript, what you want to do is interact with the browser, right? So that's the next phase of this class after we pass Dev 0. But I feel like I'm in good position to do the next step. All right. So what's my walk away? Last week, I had some specific questions for you to watch my code do it. And maybe those are a little more interesting for you than what we've done today. But what I've done today is hopefully have you start, now that you've articulated an idea, how would you actually represent that idea in code? And the suggestion I'm going to give you to walk away with is, the sooner the better. Come talk to me, because you and I can do some troubleshooting and maybe help you take a concept if you're struggling with how to implement, and give you some suggestions for basically how to meet the requirements, which I think I've already talked about that in week 5, showing you those requirements. But I did this for my Python class, and if you want this as well, if you want to actually have me post the list of those out, because I don't think I did it here. Did I in week 5? Let me see. Oh, I did. Oh, good for me. So actually, I did put the requirements out on week 5 Learn Together. All right. So what I want in your reply, I want to know, now that you've written about it, do you feel like you could start at least trying to code some of that out? Okay. All right. Have a great weekend. See you later.